Hello and welcome to another YouTube lesson. So today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking you through drawing the structures of a face, a portrait, and then sort of to break that down a little bit more, I'm going to show you some techniques that I use drawing things like eyes and noses and mouths, just to kind of break those things up into different shapes and different making them easier to draw. You can see on this eye here I've added a little bit of shadow and a little bit of tone in there, so I'd like to talk you through that as well. Just how I achieve that, just using a few simple pieces of equipment. I think I only used a couple of pencils for that as well. And also as well different ways of blending your pencil. Okay, so first of all, what we're going to do, we're going to start off with, we're going to look first at how a face is put together. So I'm going to apologise now because my children are downstairs running riot. So if you can hear children in the background, that is why you can hear them. Right, to do this, okay, you need to start off with a circle. It's the first thing we need. So we're just going to draw a circle in here, and we're going to start off with drawing a circle. Now, what you'll find with the face is that a lot of facial features, they are in proportion relative to each other, and this is an average face that I'm drawing, and so obviously some people have smaller noses, some people have bigger mouths, some people's eyes are bigger than others, so you can adapt these methods according to the subject that you're drawing. Okay, right, so we've done this now. As you start to do this, I'm drawing my lines slightly darker than what I would normally do, just purely so the camera can pick it up. But as you're doing this, make sure you keep all of these construction lines nice and light. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to draw in the middle of this circle, I'm going to draw a square. Okay. There you go. So I've drawn a square in the middle of the circle. And then in that square, I am going to draw a cross to find the center of the square, which is here. Okay, so what we're doing now is starting to put together the construction lines of the face, of the portrait. And now we can start to build this portrait up a little bit. So here we have an eye line. So just underneath this eye line, what I'm going to do is I am going to draw a second eye line just underneath. And if those of you who watched the manga video that I did, this is a very similar technique here. So this is going to be sort of the top of my eyes or part of the eyes here. Now, unlike the manga video, the eyes, when you're drawing eyes in proportion, they should you should be able to fit 5 eyes in here. So if I was to draw 5 eyes right next to each other, I should be able to fit 5 eyes all the way across here. Okay, but people don't generally have 5 eyes, so we're just going to draw 2 eyes. So we're going to put the eyes in there. So these are like some almond shaped eyes. Now, what, as I say, I'm just putting these in here, and I will go through drawing the eyes with you at the end of this little demonstration of putting the face together. So now we're going to do the nose line, which is here, and we're going to start our nose sitting just above the nose. Okay. Now with the nose, I just simply do my nose with circles. So that's sitting just above this nose line. Okay. And then we'll just bring this up. And you'll find as you bring that up, that will naturally lead into an eyebrow line here, just coming off the top line there of your eye line. So now we've got a nice nose line, okay, just on that bottom square there. So now obviously we need to put the chin in here as well. So I am going to bring this down. Now again, this all depends on how big the person's face is. Like, some people have more larger chiseled chins than others. So an average chin, I am going to go, so from the center here, I'm going to take that as so from underneath the nose here to the center of the eyes here, as my distance that I want my chin to come under, about there. This is all sort of estimating, and you can use your pencil to gauge the distance as well. So this is for you to play around with. What I recommend is that you maybe get a couple of pictures, or even do a self-portrait or something, and just look at the proportions of somebody's face. Maybe do a portrait of somebody in your household. Look at the proportions of someone's face and sort of work it out that way, using your pen as a gauge. Okay. And then I'm just going to draw some lines down here, some straight lines. Now, I always tend to work, I like to work using straight lines and circles to start off with, and then I can start to compile the detail into the picture. Now here we're going to start to get the shape of the face in. So as I'm coming up, the outside square here, this is where the head is going to come out. And the same here, you're going to start to get the temple of the head. And that's where the temple's going to come out. Now, obviously, you're going to have hair that goes on there if your person has hair. You can start to see this coming together quite nice. Now, this line here at the bottom of the circle, this is where the face is going to go. Now, generally speaking, again, this is the average face. The corners of the mouth, if you was to draw lines down from the pupil down into to the corners of the mouth, you'll find that they are aligned together. Okay, you'll find that they're aligned together there. So what I'm doing is I'm just using a few little techniques here to draw the mouth and the nose and the eyes. But after I've done this demonstration, I will go through each individual sort of little technique I'm using to get these sort of proportions right. Okay. There we go. So we'll do the mouth a little bit open. There we go. That's brilliant. So that's the mouth. And now with the ears, so this is where the circle comes into play here with the ears. So your ears, the tops of an ear should sit sort of parallel with the eye line as well, and then the bottoms of the ears would normally sit parallel with the bottom of the nose here. So I am just going to draw in an ear here. Okay, like so, and then just putting a few little details here on the edge of the ear, and there we've got an ear. And then if you want to add hair to this, you can start to do that by starting off with maybe a bigger circle, and then using that to get your hair in proportion with each side. So that's the basics of drawing a face. So if you remember, we started off with a circle, we drew a square in the circle, and then we drew a cross in the center of that square. And everything else has just sort of kind of formulated from that point onwards. Now, to draw individual features, I'm going to start with drawing the nose. Now, noses are often quite difficult things, or people often find noses quite difficult to draw. There is a really simple and easy way that you can draw a nose. Okay, so if you go back to my demonstration here, I use this center line here. So if I do a little zoom in drawing of that center line, there we go. That's this center line coming down here. Okay. Then I've got the line that comes across. So that's this line that's coming across here. Okay. Now, what you need to do is for this, a nose is basically made up of 3 circles, and depending on how big the nose is and how small the noses depends on how big or small the circles are that you draw. Okay, so we're going to draw one big circle here, like this, and then we're going to draw two smaller circles either side of that big circle there. Okay, and then from this point onwards, we can add in the features of the nose. So we've got, you see, we've got this shape here. So what we're going to do is here, we're just going to follow that the bottom of that larger circle, drawing these two little bits pointing out here, and then we're going to follow the lines of the smaller circles, but not all the way up, like that, and then slowly starting to creep into the big circle there. And you can see a nose starting to formulate here, and then it can go up like that. And as you can see, I've just used the edges of those circles just to get these nostrils and things in place. Put a little bit on the top. And you can imagine how if I was to draw, let me just show you, if I was to draw a larger circle in the middle, like this, and then maybe two smaller circles, I'm going to get a much different shape to my nose. Like this. So I'm going to get a much sort of wider nose. Like that. So I'm going to get a much different shape. Okay, so that's how we can adapt that to get different noses. So then the next thing I want to talk you through is the mouth. Okay, again, mouths are another thing that people find quite difficult to draw, but they are quite simple, and you can break them down quite easily with a mouth just using lines and shapes. So if we imagine, I'm going to take the line there, so we're imagining that that's the in fact, I'm going to do it just underneath my nose, just so you can see it relative to the picture actually. So there's a line there. Okay. Now, if you remember in this example here, I explained about the lines coming down from the pupils. So if we imagine that they're the lines coming down from the pupils there. Okay. Now, to do this, to get the top of the lip, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly draw in here a triangle. Okay, so I'm going to put this triangle in like this, and then at the bottom of the triangle, I'm going to complete it by drawing a line here. So now we've got a triangle shape, and then we've got either side of there, we've got an equal distance to either side here of this line. Okay, now the top of if we go to the top of the triangle, this is where the top of our lips are going to sit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a really sort of stretched out M shape, I think is the best way to describe it, a stretched out M shape. And then I'm just going to draw a line and a line to the corner, so straight lines. And then this here is going to be the line where we put the bottom of the triangle is going to be the bottom of the lips. And then I'm going to draw a line to there and a line to there. I'm just going to put a really sort of just a curved line really there. And then, so now I've got I've set it up ready to start to put the details into the face. Now, I've started off with the straight lines because I find it really difficult to try and go in and try and draw curved lines that match identical on either side. You'll always find that you can draw one side of the mouth stronger than the other side of the mouth. So that's why I put the straight lines in there. Okay, so I'm now going to add in my curved lines using the straight lines as my guide. Okay, and I find that much easier than trying to freehand draw in the curved lines. So I'm using these as guides to get it in proportion and get them even on both sides. Okay, bottom of the lip I'm going to trace in there darker, and then I'm going to do the same here. Just trace and put a little bit of a curve in there. There we go. So we've now started to get a good shape here, but I'm going to do the mouth slightly open. And again, what I'm doing is I'm using the triangle that we drew in there initially to help me with where I want the lines to curve. So where I want the bottom of the lip, top of the lip to curve, to keep it all in proportion. So I'm just going to put a line in there, and that's where I want it to curve, just at the bottom there. There we go. There we go, and then we've got a mouth there, and we can, if we like, we can add some teeth in there as well. There we go. Add some teeth in there, like that. Okay, so that's our mouth that we've got drawn in place. Now, what a lot of people like to draw is eyes. But quite often people find eyes quite tricky things to draw, really. But again, using lining shapes, they can be quite simple to draw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through drawing an eye, and I'm going to start off drawing in a straight line. Okay, so this would be the eye line, the bottom of the eye line here. That I'm drawing now, and then where I want the center of my eye to be, I'm drawing another line. So we're going to end up with a cross like this. So if I take each corner of each eye, that's what I'm going to mark on here now, and I want them to be even on both sides. Okay, so I'm going to mark it here, and you don't have to use a ruler. I'm just going to use my pencil as my gauge, just to roughly work out where I want each corner to be. And then this is going to be the top of my eye here, and this is going to be the bottom of my eye. What you'll notice with eyes, often the top is slightly more curve in the line than the bottom is slightly less of a curve. Okay, and then I'm going to draw in some lines here, like that. So I've got this sort of diamond kite shape here. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to trace in the outside of this line using a slightly darker pencil. And then, as before, I'm using the straight line that I've put in as a guide to getting my curve lines in. Like that. Okay. So I'm using the straight lines that I put in as my guide for my curve lines. And now we need to put in the iris. Okay, so we need we want this to sit in quite nice. I'm going to put this here actually. So I'm just going to do a circle. Okay, now the light circle will go slightly outside, but that's to keep it so we're getting a nice sort of round to the iris of the eye. And then I am going to add in just tracing some slightly darker lines here. So my eye's actually going to be looking up. And then I want to do the same again. I'm going to add in a pupil. So my eye's looking up here. Now, one of the things with working in pencil is quite often it's not what we put on the paper, it's what we take away from the paper and what we leave. Is what makes a difference between making like a really sort of realistic drawing as opposed to something that is less realistic. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly sketch in a circle here. Now I'm going to try, if I can, to keep this circle white, so as to say that the light's coming across to hit it. Okay, you'll see as we go along what I mean by that. I'm just going to put in a few creases, a few details around the edges here. Right, I'm switching now to a 6B pencil. Okay, when I talk, I'm going to add some tone to this eye as well. When I talk to the students at school, I talk about blending and using different things to put a base coat of pencil down. Now, what some people do is they'll take their pencil and they'll just go across and they'll rub it with their finger like this, and that's fine, that's okay. But the only thing is you can't really sort of put on too much pressure. You get grease from your finger on the page, and I don't think you get an even blend. So what I tend to do is either use a blending pencil and if you have a blending pencil, you'll know what a blending pencil is. I have some blending pencils at school, but obviously I'm not at school, I'm here, so I'm having to make do. So you can use cotton buds, or you can use a piece of tissue. I've chosen to use a piece of tissue this time. And I'm just gonna, in small circles, I'm just gonna go around and I'm just gonna blend that in like that. And depending how much pressure I put on, depends on how light and dark it will come out if I want to blend that out, okay? Like that. So that's what I'm going to do. So to start off with here on this eye, I am going to go over the whole thing, the whole of the eye, with a 6B pencil, and I'm doing this super light because this is just a base. So I've gone over that whole eye super light because it's a base, and then I'm going to take this piece of tissue and I'm going to blend over the whole thing like that. Don't worry about going over the edge because we're going to tidy this up in a second. Now you'll notice that I forgot to rub out my construction lines, which probably better if you did, but it doesn't matter because I can go back and I can rub that out as we go along. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take away from this eye by using an eraser rubber. Okay, I am actually going to be using one of these rubbers, which is a detail rubber, and they're pretty cheap, and you can get them at most places. But I tend to order a lot of my drawing stationery from China, which, as you can imagine, is difficult at the moment. But you can use a normal rubber, okay, and you can still create a detail rubber. And what I would do is just take a small craft knife or any form of knife, and then just really carefully just blend. So I just cut a small piece of this off. Probably advise don't use your sketchbook as a cutting board, and then you'll end up with a nice tip, and you can work that just as well as what you can work with this. Okay, it's probably perhaps a little bit more fiddly, but it still does the same thing. So you can do that as well. Okay, right. So I'm going to use my my detail rubber, and I'm just going to go in and take out around the edges to start to tidy up the edges of the eye. Then working on the inside where the whites of the eye are, I'm just going to slowly start to take away some of this. Okay, and what it's doing is it's not going completely white, but because we put that base down, it's going to leave me a nice grey tone, which we can work into at a later date. We can work into that grey tone. Okay, there we go. And then what I don't do is I don't use my hand to brush away, because what happens is all that smudging that you've just taken out and rubbed out, you're going to then smudge it all back in. So I tend to use a brush, a clean dry paintbrush, and I just use that to brush it away. And it's just a little bit easier than using your hands, and then your work just gets a little bit messy if you do that. Then do you remember the dot that we put in here that I said I wanted to leave nice and white if I could? I'm just going to go in there and take some of that out. Okay, and then I'm going to go in where I can still see where I marked in the pupil, and I'm going to go in there quite lightly like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm very lightly just going to blend that out, and then I'm going to try something to give it a little bit of texture to the iris. You know how you get the little lines in the iris, the creases? I'm just gonna flick out, putting a little curve in my line, because I want to keep that curve of the eye in there as well. So put a little curve in my eye, and I'm going to do the same coming out this way. Okay. Okay, so here we go. We started to get this eye come together, and then I said I'm going to come back and add some detail to the whites of this eye. What I'm going to do is I'm quickly just use a plain piece of paper on my sketchbook just to clean away some of the some of the lead off of my rubber, and then I'm going to go back into this area of the whites, and I'm going to slowly start to clean it up, but leaving some of the area slightly grey. So I'm only sort of cleaning certain areas of it up, leaving some of it slightly grey. The other good thing is as well, when you're doing things like this, is don't restrict yourself to just using solely pencil. You can go in and use, like in some areas where it's particularly dark, use like black fine liners and things, and experiment and play around with what works and what doesn't, because that's quite fun to do, and you'll be surprised by the effects that you get by doing that. So now I'm going to go in my 6B pencil, and I'm working very lightly here. I'm not putting on lots of pressure. I'm just using the darkness of the pencil really to get that sort of dark finish to the pupil. What you find, if you're working too much pressure, your paper becomes flat where you're putting the pressure on, and you don't really want that, because if you have to do what we've done here, where we've gone back in and rubbed out and added and rubbed out and rubbed out and added, you'll start to see that show through the through the shading that you've done, which is actually can be handy in some situations, which I might demonstrate how that can be handy in a second. So here we go. So I'm just going to add that in darker. So that's the pupil, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the edges of the iris, again working quite lightly, just adding in some of the darker tones here, and then again I want to keep that curve in the eye, and what I'm doing is I'm following using from where I rubbed out some of those whiter, lighter lines, I'm using the edges of that as a bit of a guideline really. There we go. And can you see how I'm taking my time when I'm putting these lines in? I'm not rushing it. You never need to rush any of your artwork unless you're drawing a really fast train, and in which case you haven't got long to draw it. Okay, there we go. And now I'm just going to add in some of the detail around this edge here. I'm just going to add in a bit of tone at this edge to sort of bring it in. And the same a little bit. It's these little bits that you just add in, and then just slowly just you'll start to build up a picture, adding layers of tone and taking tone away. And then I'm just going to go back in and then what I'm going to do is right here in the middle of this pupil here, I'm going to see if I can add take a smaller piece away. There we go. That's good. And then that is how we get a nice eye all in proportion. One of the other things that I use, which I know some of you may not have access to at home, is, I don't know if you've ever heard of these jelly roll pens. Again, I buy these on the internet from overseas, but you can get them here. You can get them all over the place. I think Raymond's sell them as well, and these are quite good. If you don't have one of these, but you have maybe like a Tipp-Ex or a white paint or something like that, you can use that with a really fine brush or a piece of cocktail stick or something like that, and experiment that way. But these are really good for when you've done your eyes, just adding in some lighter, whiter areas going over the top of your pencil. Now, when I said to you earlier on in the video, it's quite nice to experiment and try different materials. Don't just solely stick to pencil. This is the sort of thing that I mean, just to add in those sort of bits that you wouldn't normally be able to work in the same if you're using pencil. Okay, I'm just going to add a little bit in there as well, and a little bit just over the edge there. So you can use these to add in details as well. Now, I did also mention, and I hadn't planned to do this in the video, so just bear with me a second. I was going to explain to you how having lines in your page might help in some situations, and it does help actually if you're perhaps drawing hair, and to get that, or if you're drawing like a fine fur or something like that, it does help quite a lot. So I'm going to quickly demonstrate this this technique here. Okay, so if you imagine this is just a chunk of hair that I've just picked out of somewhere, and I'm going to take this, which is just it's just like an engraving for printing, but it's got like a fairly, you don't want a sharp edge, you want like a rounded sort of blunt edge. Like that's not sharp really at all. You could do this with a cocktail stick, you could do it with a barbecue skewer, a fork, or any number of things that you've got kicking around the house. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to just go in and I'm just going to add in some lines where I would have individual strands of hair. Now you probably can't see this on the camera. It's probably not picking it up. I'd be surprised if it is, because my phone isn't that good. There we go. So I'm just adding in where I would have some strands of hair. Okay, like that. And that, if I feel that, that's quite textured there. And then what I'm going to do is, with my pencil, my 6B pencil, I'm going to lightly go over this, and then what you have is the start of the starting point for drawing hair. So sometimes using things like this and engraving the page does help with sketching, but again, this is just for you to take away and have a little sort of play around with and see what you come up with, because they can be quite useful techniques. And I'm just going in now, and what I'm doing is I'm just filling in some of the areas with slightly darker pencil, and then leaving some of the areas, and you can see the hair sort of coming out like that. There we go. And then if you wanted to draw the hair and maybe make a section slightly lighter than the rest of it, what you can do is, as you're putting this in, just focus your engraving, I think you call it engraving, you're scratching into the page. Don't go on too hard, because you don't want to go through the page. You want to have some paper left to work into. So if we just go in like this, and then just put a little bit more, if we put a little bit more pressure where we perhaps want the page to be that little bit lighter, and then when we go over it, just go over it nice and lightly, you'll see that we've left more of it out, so we can then go back and we're going to add in the darker tone, and then it's just going to leave. So we want like a nice light sort of shade coming across there, but we can leave some of it out. And even now, even when I'm going over with a darker pencil, you can see it's still picking up those strands that I've drawn in the page. I wonder what would happen if we just went over it with the tissue and did it this way as well. This might also add a nice effect to it as well. So there you go. That's another thing for you to play around with. I hadn't planned on showing you that technique, but I have. And until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you again. Bye bye.